if you already have Teams sites, what I'm going to do is not go through a demonstration of Teams per se, but rather highlight how Teams is being used in various parts of a university. This is a nice diagram that leads on from what Rob was saying earlier in regards to, you see the different colors and how they match up nicely with our transformation framework. What I'm going to be talking about today is whatever fits under the purple. Purple is the Teams color. It's the best color in all of Microsoft. It also just coincidentally happens to be my favorite color. So I landed in the right engineering team. It's a great tie. It's the color of royalty. So productivity and collaboration. This is really where we're going to focus today. Later on, if we have time and if you're interested, I can certainly talk in collection and how we aggregate data and surface some insights about our students. I'll highlight some of those things in some case studies. We have 3 different very simple case studies, including a deep dive into what Professor Kellerman did and how he's taking that video, what you just saw in that demonstration, to the next level. We're actually working on the next piece of that. And then the core infrastructure that sits under all of this, that from an Azure Cognitive Service perspective or through, putting Moodle and other core infrastructures that you may have on, the Azure stack. That I can talk to that as well, but we probably won't get to that in this conversation. So, I'm really going to focus on Teams because clearly that's what I do. 365 more broadly. I'm also going to talk about some of the cognitive services. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate. I hate the sound of my own voice. I love presenting. I don't have the smoothest voice. I have a very thick Australian accent and I apologize in advance. Likewise, if I am speaking really quickly, don't hesitate to say, hey, can you just slow down a little bit? Or ask questions. I am open to all sorts of questions. And really, the presentation can very well be a choose your own adventure. So if there are topics that you are more interested in, I'm going to cover a very broad, high level spectrum of topics. We can deep dive into something that your clicker. Modern university look like? Now, for those of us that are in IT and work with IT bodies, IT pros, really we can classify the different workloads or the different technologies that we work in university in the very broad buckets. See though, we have staff projects, research, lecture capture, multimedia content, calendars, assignments, creating course cohorts, all of these fun things that we kind of bucket together. But Teams icon sits kind of in all of them. And that's very much because we see Teams at the heart of learning and teaching and very much the heart of your learning and teaching transformation. For the Microsoft 365 or Office 365 engineering teams, we see Teams as the future of Office 365 and the future of Office 365. As a matter of fact, our investment and what we are basically spending our money on is largely on how Teams can be the best product to service what you want to do to get your job done. Okay? When you're thinking about Teams, it is not just about chat. Chat's fun, GIFs are fun, that's great, and it's a great tool for doing those things. Conferencing, yep, absolutely rock solid, fantastic place for doing meetings, but more than that. It's about what tools do you need to bring into Teams to get your job done. So if you're an IT professional, you've probably got a range of different tools that you use as an IT pro for monitoring servers and stacks and looking at code and all of that. That's one subset. But you have different personas at a university. Teachers need to take attendance. So having those attendance tools on top of Teams is something that we help build out. As a student, I probably need access to library resources and research articles and journals and those sorts of tools. Bringing those into Teams creates and really makes Teams the one window that you enter to get everything done in your job, regardless of what you are doing, be it a student, a teacher, or a professional worker at a university. Am I moving too quick? Because I'm speaking really quick. Just cognizant of everyone's time and hunger and caffeine levels. So these are the going to talk today. The first one is my passion area. Studying at distance through e-learning platforms, etc. Operational staff, very, very important for a university. And to be honest, most Teams adoption or early adoption Teams or M365 in general tends to start in that admin space. Okay, so when it comes to supportability and the IT pros and the people that really are the first to get their hands on the tech, this is where we typically start. Another area that's top of mind, and for me personally as a PhD student, research is an area where Teams has really started to shine. And I just want to spend a bit of time talking about how I personally use Teams with my professor to drive my academic program. So, each one of these, again, going back to this, could potentially be a choose your own adventure. Could be an entire day workshop. So I'm not going to go and spend an entire day on each one of these. Brief overview. So, learning and teaching. Teams is increasingly seen as the place where students come to curate content themselves. So when I'm delivering learning and teaching, or when I have a course, or the way that I professor to teach a course in Teams, subject, in our case it might for each team you have what's called channels. And each channel typically corresponds to a topic or a week or whatever it is that you use internally to sort of map out your subject area. Is drive your topic conversations and it's just a natural way to work with. On top of that, using Teams, again, class notebooks where I'm able to have really the resources I need my students to see and read and access, be they video or written text, as you saw Professor Kellerman sort of introduce, is a way that I, as the teacher, can have both a space that's shareable to the students. It's a place where the students get their own collaborative writing space, and it's also where I can to have their own personalized notebooks that I, as the teacher, still have oversight over. So I can go into each student's notes and sort of provide guidance and sort of teaching starts. Above and beyond, Teams is a powerful tool for assignments and particularly formative assessment. So those assignments where you're trying to give students very timely feedback on their progress. It could be things that they might be working or trying to evidence their learning in a physical space, and you're able to work with them directly or provide guidance directly inside of Teams. There's a really good use case that I'm going to show you a little bit later on about how we have a pharmacy professor, so a medical professor, working with students in a simulation where essentially they're mentored by professors in the field. And those professors don't necessarily need to be on the same campus. They don't necessarily need to be in the same country, but they're able to provide that personalized guidance and mentoring to these essentially graduate students or students who are soon to graduate. So that's an example. Research collaboration. Teams, yes?
I just want to ask about the assignments.
Yes.
Because we actually have rolled out Microsoft Teams in our faculty, for particular medicine. And what we found with Microsoft Teams is fantastic for collaboration. People can use it, people can collaborate online. My question is, the issue that we found is the on security that we want to put sensitive data.
Yes.
We know that it's just the platform itself. Just with Microsoft Teams, you know that when you log in, and then it tends to stay logging. So when, for example, the lecturers come in the lecture hall and use Teams,
they don't log out. Yeah.
At the same time, this can also decide we found that we try to limit Teams so that the security is more towards local management, but you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very valid question. The question is for the recording around security and that really the behavioral change necessary for the end users to log out of a session or log out of their PC when they leave the classroom. Particularly if you're using medical data and sensitive data, personalized information about patient records, those sorts of things, then yeah, in my experience, that comes more down to training the end users on just good practices around security, more so than a team's function per se. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If habitually you're potentially and your academics don't log out of computers, then I think that's definitely an opportunity for upskilling in. They can have access to way more things than you really, they've. So you can, which is probably the better practice. Session call? Yeah. Office 365, there are mechanisms in place to do that. It's probably a deeper, broader conversation, but...
Can I counter that with... So I understand the use case and the problem, and one definite response here is user training. But if you have Teams as a platform, imagine if you have WhatsApp on your phone that logged out every 5 minutes and you couldn't get messages. It would render it useless. It's a collaboration platform. We want it logged in all the time. To me, it's locking the device. That PC auto locks after 5 minutes.
Not 5 minutes.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it happens to be.
After a period of inactivity, that knocks everything out. That is a signal that that user is now no longer using that device, so they don't care about it, and they'll just get a Teams notification on their phone or something like that. My PC is the same. Auto locking, I have to then go in, use my... Will also make it easier to lock. I look at my PC and it unlocks. Okay, so it's that adding that security, but then when I'm there, I'm using it, it's got to be functional. It needs that balance.
Yeah.
But on top of, to add to that, security settings is the rest of your organization, the rest of your directory. So by using something like Teams, you get the security policy that you wouldn't get with, say, that is not linked to your security. There's other ways we can make it.
Yeah, there's a very broad conversation around what can, if something were to occur as well, the auditability and the trailing of that as well. There's, and there are, a Microsoft perspective, really it's the assumption that the device what would control that. Because really, if you log in as each user will have training your end users to be happen when somebody takes control of their identity, essentially.
Based on our experience, if you want to get end users to be trained, if you make it optional, like teaching and learning, they can choose to use it or not. Most likely they will get complacent, and then the change management is always the difficult part.
Absolutely.
From assessment point of view, meaning that they need to enter data, examine data, to calculate, for example, what we have here, cost learning outcome, learning outcome, to calculate continuous quality improvement. You see, this is mandatory requirement, required medication, and then they need to use it.
They need to do things, yeah. Yeah,
That's a good start for us to train them.
There's,
then the question comes security.
yeah, so there's a couple of ways that you can approach change management. I am more of the opinion, particularly in learning and teaching places that really the control and the ownership of how you deliver learning and teaching should be with the teacher. And if they don't want to use Teams, I'm okay as a teacher, as a trained professional in that space. However, by creating things like champion networks and people that are going to assist you in driving that people change, you can overcome some of that compulsory need. That being said, there's a lot that the university can do to guide people on the best practices. From the year 2020 or whatever, starting point you wanted to choose, we expect you as a baseline to have these channels in your team, and on top of that you need to have a OneNote with the topics pre-populated. They can take that a step further and through automation pre-populate that on behalf of the teachers as well. So they're that gap. Some of it, yes, is a little bit of flexibility and ownership on the teacher. Some of it is the IT pros engaging and saying, okay, we're going to automate a lot of it for you.
Jason will show later on some content that we are making available to you to drive that change piece.
Yep.
From user guides, templates, how to, teachers, students, researchers, everybody.
It's all there.
Building some of that, we've been on the journey. Keep changing the product.
Yep.
So we can help you with that. The second point is I know some universities in Malaysia have a KPI on their lecturers of usage of e-learning tools. We can allow you to report on this should you wish.
Yep.
So that's something we can enable you. That's the kind of the carrot and the stick approach.
That's
See, works really well here is the carrot and the competition.
Yeah.
Who's getting the best student satisfaction? The Kellerman example, student satisfaction, which was derived by a better learning experience, of which Teams was a part of. And there's varying levels.
There's varying levels. Yeah. It's a very interesting conversation. It really, really is an important conversation. That change management piece in itself, and the idea of KPIs is an interesting one. It's certainly not something we would do in Australia, but I have seen universities mandate that at least they have a course page in their learning management system, at a minimum. But consistency is important for students as well. Research collaboration, just moving to research, is something that is top of mind for most universities because there are squeezes the amount of travel that we are afforded these days. There's budgets in place for research. So how do we really empower our researchers to work with one another, potentially outside the country, work with researchers in different institutions? How do we make that easy and also a really rich collaborative space for people to work within? So in my case, I'll give you the example of how I am doing my PhD. My professor and I set up a team, and we made the decision to have other students as a part of that team as well. So we're all going kind of on the same journey. You can imagine we're actually working on a research project if that just makes things a bit easier for you. Inside that team, we have a couple of different channels. Some of those are fundamental for, hey, there are events happening at the library that you should attend, there are workshops, there are things happening on campus potentially that you need to be a part of. That's just part of the high degree research program. Beyond that, we have individual. So we've got slightly early access. Private channels are coming really, really soon. Private channels where we are able to have one-to-one conversations with each other. So sort of that mentoring and peer process where, hey, are you going to submit your latest revision on time, and that sort of prompting. But we do everything inside of Teams. So my research paper, so my thesis, is written as a Word file inside of Teams. I have access to it, clearly, because I'm the one writing it. My professor gets to see that in real time and how I am tracking in terms of that construction. He's able to provide feedback in real time as necessary. But interestingly, the other research students can see that as well. So we've kept it open so that they're able to provide feedback, and I am in turn able to provide feedback on their papers. It's kind of a different flip on that. You can imagine though, if I'm producing a research article for publication as a collaborative group, we can share a single document, be that a PowerPoint, be that the Excel core data sheets, be it the Power BI that we're using to visualize that data, or potentially just the Word document that we're writing the article with. And in real time, not only are we creating this document, and by the way, one of my professors or supervisors is an external. They actually work for Apple, who is supervising me in this process. But they're external to the organization. They're a guest. But they are still able to come into that conversation, edit the document, provide comments, and more, you've got the document pane, so you can see the document in real time, but then we can have this constant perpetual feed of, stream of consciousness in our chat feed as well. So as we're having these conversations, we're actually in real time making changes to our documentation. The one thing for me personally that has been a game changer in doing my research is Meet Now function. So the idea that I can say to my professor, because we're both, respectively busy, he's incredible. Hey, I'm at an airport, minutes to just talk about feedback you gave me. And without needing to schedule a meeting, we can click Meet Now. It's a full meeting experience. And then on top of that, we can pull up the Whiteboard, which is another app inside of Microsoft Teams. It's actually an Office 365 application. And we can brainstorm using Digital Ink on our respective Surface devices. That is a really fantastic way to collaborate, even though we're not even in the same country. And having external people, so you can imagine you have your university and then you're doing a research paper with a university in the United States. If, let's say, your university owns the IP and you're the principal researcher on that paper, it sits within your tenant, so you have control over that. But the guests who are helping assist write that paper come into the team and are able to basically do everything you can do. They're not the owners, but they can still co-write, co-author, co-publish, and submit all in the one place, which is a really fascinating way and a really, funnily enough, faster way to get stuff done. If you've ever worked in research, and I'm assuming most people in the room have, just getting people to talk to one another in a different country or in a different university is really hard to do. So by having this space, you expedite the research process, which is really interesting.
Okay, Rob. The problem is, in terms of collaboration, especially in Malaysian university, our university subscribed the A1 license individually. However, there's no way for us to connect with other universities because why? The license is individual, so it's a headache for the IT guys to go and
assign the licenses.
Open up the access for us to invite guests from other universities. Why don't you have a patch for all the universities in Malaysia to have that limited?
That's not a me conversation. I'm going to leave that for the licensing people. That being, oh sorry,
This is not a licensing question, so I just want to reiterate something I said this morning. Everybody owns this already. There's no license you need to buy. What you're talking about here is, and this is a common conversation we see, I'm an educator, I just want to use this stuff, and I know how I want to use it, but I know some stuff has to be turned on. You're talking about guest access and other people having access to your environment. For security reasons, we turn that off by default. We do need IT to then turn that on. We would welcome any of you supporting us to talk to your IT teams around how we can help enable them, enable you.
and govern it safely as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are processes in place where you can whitelist specific institutions or domains or even individuals, and they can control that. So you can have an application process if that's necessary to have Rob be a guest in your tenant, and that's doable today out of the box.
So we can work with, and we appreciate this is new. For a lot of IT teams, this is completely new, and we are very happy to support that conversation. Jason and team, but Jason being in the engineering team, and we have partners as well that can help us with some of these deployments. So happy to support that, very conscious that being these demands, and we're trying to enable more and more capabilities to allow this guest type access as well.
Yep.
That's the other thing, we will keep evolving, and we're going to help teams keep up to date as well. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, it's not a, we need to give them licenses. We've made that conscious effort. We've made sure everybody has access to the technology from a commercial perspective. Now it's an enablement piece, and we would very much love to support having that conversation as well.
Yeah. So that's research in a nutshell, in a very succinct way that I personally use on a day-to-day basis. Distance learning, interestingly, most universities in Malaysia and typically most universities globally have a learning management system that they use to deliver distance learning. I know Moodle is quite here in Malaysia. I know for a fact, I probably spent a bit of time here historically implementing Moodle installations, but learning management systems are fabulous. Teams is not a learning management system. I'll clear that up right now. That's not the point. Learning management systems do things in a really sequenced way. So if you're structuring content, you're able to say, if a student gets above 40% in this topic, then we can give them supplementary materials, or we can let them get access to the next topic. As the teacher, I get to dictate step 1, step 2, step 3 in the learning journey. All of those things are really, really important. What Teams adds value to are the conversations we were just talking about in the research space. The fact that as a professor, I am able to give that more personalized experience and personalized feedback to my students. Now, assessment is totally doable inside of Teams as well. So if you chose to use Teams assignments for a submission mechanism, you can do that today. In fact, we find that most distance learning institutions are investigating Teams for the formative side of assessment. So, doing those things where you're expecting feedback to happen in a sort of timely manner. Whereas the learning management system is the summative space. That's where the final assignments typically get submitted. That being said, we are making it easy for your IT pros and obviously for your teachers in turn to use both systems seamlessly. So we already out of the box today have an integration with Moodle. So you can bring your Moodle pages into Teams and have those surface just like Professor Kellerman demonstrated at the University of New South Wales. And we can also push-pull grades back and forth as well. So if you mark something inside of Teams, you can have that pushed back to either your student information system or to Moodle. So those things are doable today. The other benefit, by the way, before I just go back to distance learning with Teams, it's a really robust platform for video and audio conferencing. So it can handle really low bandwidth as opposed to other platforms we have had historically. So we quite frequently see Australian universities in Australia reaching out to universities and having students that are studying in mainland China, for example, and still able to preserve a quality experience in terms of the video audio experience, despite it's not so much the firewall in China that's a problem, it's more the bandwidth problem getting over the ISPs. So you can imagine in some of the more remote areas of Malaysia as well, where being able to reach students using video and audio conferencing today through Teams is far easier and a far better experience than probably what they've experienced in the past. And the fact that it's mobile first means that if a student was only on a mobile, or they may not have a PC or a desktop, then they can absolutely watch those lectures and participate in meetings using their mobile devices as well.
So what is the maximum number inside?
In a meeting, I've got a slide on that coming up. It's 250 concurrent people in a traditional meeting today, or you can do a one-to-many broadcast, which is 10,000. So Stream sits on the back end. So Stream, once you record a video or once you record a meeting, will be the place where that media is stored and obviously transcribed, and other bits of AI go over that as well to make it, who said what during the meeting as well. So that's really the underlying platform for streaming is what Stream does. We're very creative with naming.
But you have access to that and you can embed stream content or build stream content.
Exactly. So if you've already got a pool of videos or potential lectures that you've already recorded, you could put those on Stream and have those surface directly inside of Teams as well.
And the same security access policies exist across the whole.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, YouTube has some fantastic use cases. I mean, everyone in this room would be watching YouTube at some point. It's a good product. We never knock our competitors. They do cool things. However, Stream is built for that purpose of streaming those meetings and lectures and educational resources, the transcription thereof, and more importantly, giving you or potentially partners and developers the endpoints, the APIs to extract that data and do what you want with it. So like Professor Kellerman does, he takes the transcript and searches that transcript for keywords and can then present back a video to a second of when he starts talking about a topic.
So meaning that if you do the live lecture, right? So it will be recorded and then we put in the stream.
Correct. Yeah.
Is it automated or?
Yes, automatic. You don't need to do anything.
Same like what we do with Xbox, right? With Xbox the Xbox.
Xbox, yes.
Yeah, it's like the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Literally, you can set up all meetings, so a class
Mm-hmm.
meeting, you can set it up to be recorded, or you can manually do it as well. And it presents a banner to note privacy policies and that sort of thing. So everyone knows it's being recorded.
Yep. And if you have students who can't attend, then yeah, they can go back and watch the video. You can have that translated into Malay if you needed to, and it'll just happen automatically.
But how accurate is the transcription? Because,
So it's an interesting point. So transcription will never be perfect, but at the same time, a human transcribing in real time will be less accurate than the machine.
A lot of people doing is using the transcription service, because you can then go back and edit it as well.
Yes.
And you can load custom words into that as well. So if you've got an engineering course with a whole lot of custom words, you can do that. And
So-
it's even better is not just your recording. You can take all of your previous video content, and we
And-
have services for you to digitize that as well.
Exactly.
So it's unlocking those insights.
Yep. Transcribe and then translate. All possible.
Microsoft Translate, that's
Yeah.
quite good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I don't know how to integrate it into Teams.
Yeah, and well, we can help you with that. So an interesting fun fact with the models that we use and the way that we train these bots in engineering, they are really, really good at understanding, very good at understanding Singaporean English and Chinese English, because funnily enough, that's where most of our development, the people that are developing the software, they're the ones that do the initial training. Now, over time, as everybody around the world uses it more, it actually gets smarter every single time. But you can imagine that initial training piece, it's happening with our developers. And where do our developers reside? In those countries. So, yeah, you'll find that's why it's taken a little while for the new, because it's a smaller population. Don't have any developers down there.
Malaysia, because I think a lot of Indonesians.
Yes, correct. Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting, but it's getting, every time it's used, it gets smarter, and it gets smarter and smarter as we go along. If it can understand my accent, and it does really, really well, it can understand anything. That being said, some really good points. So you'll see that Rob, when he presents, he wears a microphone. So the audio quality of your microphone is really important for transcription. So if you are planning on doing lecture capture or doing what we're doing now, what I'm not doing right now, is getting yourself a decent quality microphone. So team certified devices are of course the best way to go because we certify their quality. But aside from that, yeah, you should be able to upload previous videos and then let the engine just translate that and bring that in as a tab inside of a team. Very simple.
So, another question is that the stream itself. So, do it has any limit to how?
Size, width,
No,
yeah.
not the size. The viewers. How?
Stream, no. So the view, no. No. You could, again, similar idea as YouTube. You can have as many as you want. What does happen though, the more users you get watching a video, the better your analytics get. Yeah, so you get to see more rich information there. If it's only one person that views a video, it's kind of boring. But if you get to see those trends, you can actually visualize that data, and you can take that data and stick it into Power BI and all sorts of wonderful things as well.
And it comes to that getting lecturers to use tools. You can measure who's got the most popular videos.
Yeah, compete.
You can go to the extreme of linking the students with the best grades in this, or the most employable students or most successful students in this cohort.
So you can
You
imagine.
start to make analytics out of the videos now. You've got some smart behind that with outcomes. See what you can derive as well.
Here's another little, I've got two fun things. The first one thing that I learned since starting at Microsoft, so part of my research degree involved initially what I thought a whole bunch of transcription. And I actually had a budget in place to pay for someone to transcribe because I'm lazy and I wasn't going to transcribe focus groups. It's just not what, I just didn't want to do it. So you can imagine taking those recordings, assuming of course you had good quality microphones in that focus group, put it inside a stream or just ingest it however you see fit, and having it do the transcription for you, and then just simply making edits where you needed to make an edit. It's doing that research piece for you and it's not going to cost you anything.
I'll show you later. I have I would say a 20-year-old video of a Malaysian doctor doing a theoretical patient examination. I'm pretty sure it came off a VHS and was digitised, and I put it through our transcription services. I'll have to dig it up. I can show that as an example at the end, and I would say it's 95% accurate. He's not on a microphone, he's talking, and he's medical speak, and it's definitely Chinese, Malay vocabulary, and it picks up pretty well, so I'm going to show you that. I just remembered I had that video.
So the other really quick way that you can uplift your learning and teaching is by doing something as simple as capturing your lectures. Because all of a sudden you've made it a more equitable approach to learning and teaching. You have students, I guarantee at a university of your scale, with learning disabilities, visual impairment, all sorts of different limitations as well, mobility included. And just by having your lectures captured with transcription in different languages makes a world of difference. That one thing alone, if there's any one takeaway, for me personally, because I am visually impaired, you can probably see how red my eye is, that for me is a game changer as a student who suffers with these kinds of problems. So yeah, just think about how easily you could just change the lives of, even if it's 1 or 2 students in your class, by recording, transcribing, and letting them play it back in their own time.
You are actually saying we should record this session for everybody here.
Yeah, it is. It's being recorded now. So yeah, so you could stick that in stream, have it transcribed, and everybody's happy. Yeah, we can do that. That's very easy. Another area that's of interest to universities is that social inclusion piece. Now, the more that we digitize learning and teaching, the more that we push students to e-learning, the less attached to the physical university they feel. So I, for one, don't feel attached terribly to my undergrad programs. So the universities that I studied at historically, because I was primarily a distance part-time student, I don't really feel attached to that brand. However, now, because I am so deeply embedded with my professors and the conversations and the clubs and the circles and things that I can be a part of, I do feel like that's a university I want to go back to, okay, and I want to keep studying at, because I have that personal connection with it. And by using Teams in a couple of different ways. Firstly, allowing and empowering your students to create their own teams lets them have those friendship groups, have those societal groups in a place that you as the teachers and you as the university structure in general can protect them in. I guarantee every single one of your students today is using a social media to achieve that same outcome. When they already have access to these tools inside of Teams in a place that's probably far superior in terms of functionalities for them as students, and safe. The fact that if things are going to happen, and things will happen in social media where your students are at risk, the fact that they do similar behaviours in Teams means that you can audit that and you can surface students at risk or bullying behaviours, harassment, all of those different things. We have technologies in place where you can sort of solve those issues and surface that data. You can audit it, for one. Student life is about bringing in the events and the culture of your university into that virtual space. Okay, so being able, for just a really simple example, able to broadcast an event that happens on campus through a Teams live event. That alone means that a student can feel a part of that environment. If they're working full-time, they probably don't feel attached to the university if they're studying at night time. But if on the weekend or at some other point on maybe you have a festival as part of the university experience, having events broadcast to them means that they can be a part of that and participate as well. It's actually more about inclusion than it is about that social interaction. Clubs and societies, I'll just gloss over because I'm cognizant of time. Another one little bit that I'll touch on now, or the two that I'll sort of talk about, are shift workers. So Teams natively, and again, this is an IT pro would need to switch this functionality on, has mechanisms in place to manage your shifts. So if I'm a retail worker, I can manage, what hours I'm working. I can swap my shifts with another person. I can talk to my manager and say, hey, I need to swap my shift. I've got a class on. And sort of do all of those things that I need to do in a retail space. We're seeing this uptake in education simply because universities are very much a model of the outer world. You have a campus, and then you have food outlets, and then you have retail outlets, and then you have all of these other things that are a part of the university ecosystem that are primarily managed and manned by students. So by giving them the place to manage their work life in the same place that they manage their school life, in the same place that they manage their social life, you're giving them an end-to-end experience of being on the campus or a part of the university. So that's just a really interesting thing. We actually see a huge amount of growth in that shifts functionality in universities primarily. Admissions is another one. Now, I can't speak for your individual universities, but back home, we have not just exam-based admissions process anymore, depending on what level you're at. So undergraduate still very much is reliant on examinations, but the more that you move into postdoctoral, doctoral, and/or medical faculties, etc., there's typically an interview process. Sometimes that is an English language proficiency sort of interview. Other times it's just, are you actually up to scratch to be part of an MBA program at the university? Because of that guest access process that we've referred to earlier, you can bring students into either a one-to-one or a one-to-group sort of interview without them ever coming to the country if you need to. So in Australia, we source a lot of students from mainland China, from Nepal is our second largest growing area as well, and they don't necessarily have the means to pay for an airfare to come on site to do an interview. And that, frankly, is inequitable. We should not be doing that and forcing them to pay for those things. So giving them access to Teams, again, reliable in very low band. Have our students engaging in the learning before they come to campus. We can test their English proficiency. We can even deliver English language courses via Teams using that same mechanism as well. So, food for thought. Background died there. What that slide says, I'll jump out, is that everything we build in Teams, I don't know what happened there, it's quite unusual. It's because I threw it into your slide deck. Everything we build in Teams is built with accessibility in mind. We do not let a feature come into Teams unless it passes all of the highest accessibility standards. We are passionate, and this comes right down from Satya Nadella, who himself has a child with special needs. We are passionate about empowering every person on the planet to achieve more, and we cannot empower every person on the planet to achieve more unless we're empowering every child and student on the planet to achieve more, regardless of their ability. Okay? So for me, that message alone is what brought me to Microsoft. Okay? The fact that someone like myself, with all sorts of issues, can participate in a workforce full of very smart people is for me what brings me to the company. And the fact that we build our products for children and adults and learners of all ages that anybody can engage with. Okay, so everything that I'm about to talk about is built with every one of our accessibility tools in mind, including Immersive Reader, which if we have time, I'd love to demonstrate. It's my favorite tool of all time. I personally use it every day. And it is the one thing that I've shown teachers that has made people physically break down and cry when I show them. Okay, because it is that game-changing for students with special needs. So, it's amazing, yeah. So, some things that we've brought to Teams very recently or are bringing to Teams very soon can be highlighted here. I often get asked by educators, is Teams an enterprise thing that you've built that you're just giving to education? It's actually not that at all. If anything, our investment in Teams and M365 in the wider space comes from feedback from educators and from the education community. So we get lots of feedback from universities, lots of feedback from departments of education saying that whatever feature it is, we want it. Can you make that happen inside of Teams too? So because, again, we're trying to empower every person and our students are our future, we actively invest in Teams specific to education. So the Teams that you see for your universities is different to what businesses see in their tenants. They have different feature sets. That being said, things like assignments, things like the class notebooks, for example, we have enterprise customers, big banks, even big banks here in Malaysia and Singapore that are crying for those features. So they want assignments for compliance training and they want assignments for doing their end-to-end learning functions from an HR standpoint. So things that we've done, we've rebuilt the assignments. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet. So in Teams, you can assess students using any number of different mechanisms. That is an ever-growing list. So yes, you can, ask students to submit a Word file, and you can mark all of that up. You can mark against the rubric. All of those things are possible today. But we've built the infrastructure so that we can bring in additional tools over time. The first one, or the first party that we've brought in, is called Make Code. Probably not super relevant for higher education, but in the K-12 space, it is very much about that STEM, learning how to code, teaching kids how to, program or think programmatically. So going back to Rob's slide where he showed one of those 21st century skills is about computational thinking. It's a tool where we can assess students on computational thinking. Yes?
Is Grid integrated with Teams?
Yes, so Flipgrid's an interesting one. I'm glad you brought it up. Flipgrid is one of my favorite education tools of all time. Many of you know that it was an acquisition of ours. We bought Flipgrid. We are bringing the full thing basically into Teams over time. So step one will be able to create a flip camera assignment type. So you can imagine students evidencing something they are doing via video as an assignment submission. So a very short video. For those that don't know what Flipgrid is, it's like Snapchat for education. So short burst videos or shorter videos, you capture it, you upload it, it stays there and they can stream it back. As a teacher, I can provide feedback based on a video. That will be an assignment type inside of Teams. Additional features will be coming, and I wish I could say it in a large forum, but I'm being recorded. I'll take it offline and I can talk to you in a little bit more depth later on. So, gradebook. Now, Teams is not Moodle. We are not building Moodle. What we are doing is giving teachers a window into what their students are doing inside of Teams. So if you are using Teams for formative assessments, and if you are using Teams potentially for summative assignments, we need to have a way to visualize the grades and the performance of your students. It's a no-brainer. So what we did is collate a bunch of feedback from educators around the world and say, what is it that you really want in a gradebook? And the overwhelming feedback is we want something super simple. We just want to see, frankly, the grades for each one of those submissions and being able to drill down into each assignment and each student respectively so we can see their individual progress against the cohort. That's what we built. So it's split into two parts. The overarching gradebook, again, not Moodle. You can't curve grades. You can't do fancy mathematical equations on those grades. It's a visualization. And then you've got the individual student progress view. Now, putting my high school teacher hat on, I would use the individual student progress for showing a parent how their child is doing in my class. It is perfect for that solution. It shows me not only that, this is a bit small, to give you a view, like I'm remembering this because I can't see right now. It's a student, his name is Juan, he's getting 85% on average for his assignments, and then it's a breakdown of each assignment and how he is respectively performing in each one of those assignments. And it will indicate via sort of traffic lights, red being it hasn't been submitted, yellow it's late or whatever, and black it's been submitted. I can see with this student getting a high distinction average, late, and not submitting other things. Teacher says there's a problem at home, this kid is lazy and we need to have a conversation. So that's really what this was built for. Announcements I won't talk about right now because I'm running out of time. Mobile grading. I love mobile grading. The idea that as a teacher, and I used to teach linguistics at university, which means really large academic papers which are really heavy to carry home. I can do that on my phone now. I don't need students to submit things physically anymore. I can flip through their papers, I can mark with a stylus and provide feedback on a rubric directly on my mobile device. Admittedly, to be totally honest, I'm probably going to use because I love my Surface, so I'm typically always going to use that for everything. But if I wanted to take it on the train, I can totally do that as well and continue without carrying paper anymore. Weekly Digest. If you're looking for the guides on this, it's not called the Weekly Digest. It's called the Parent Digest. I don't like the language parent for a number of reasons. Firstly, not every child has a parent. And second of all, because it has more use cases than just than K-12. Okay, so in higher education, I'm not sure if anyone in the room is in an MBA, who teaches MBA programs or short courses in a business school, but oftentimes you have a business, let's say my boss, sponsoring me to go do a short course at a university. As part of that agreement, I need to evidence my learning, I need to evidence my assignment submissions, and I need to evidence that I actually do have things due when I'm asking for a day off to study. And that is what that digest does. Okay, and you can pull that out of Teams soon. It's a feature that's been announced, it's not available today. Other stuff, I'm not going to go into each one of these features, but you can see that we are heavily investing in Teams, and we're investing in not just Teams as the platform, we're investing in our partner ecosystem as well. So education, we know that we have lots of different tools that we use to teach with digitally. I'll talk to one example. ClickView in Australia is a education video streaming platform. They curate and build their own video content, and then they give that to students across, primarily K-12, but also in our higher ed space. We're building an integration with them for Teams, and that's going to be using this share to Teams function. Okay, so the idea would be, as the teacher, I go to the resource that I want to go to. That could be, it could be Bing News, it could be research articles, it could be ClickView, as I spoke about. I choose the video and I say share to Teams. It knows through single sign-on who I am and therefore what channels and teams I belong to, and I can share that resource, have the link automatically preview inside that channel, and the students can go and access that resource directly inside of Teams. That's what the share to Teams functionality does. If in Malaysia, in your particular faculties, there are learning tools that you would love to see inside of Teams, or potentially something where a share to Teams would make really good sense, please let me know. I will actively chase those organizations to make them add that tiny little widget to their web pages. It won't be hard. I will kick them as hard as I have to. So, lovely stuff. Going back to your, sorry, my voice is getting hoarse. Going back to the meetings. So there are really, inside of Teams, oh, beautiful, thank you. There are really 3 different types of meetings inside of Teams today, okay? We've bundled 2 of them together. So we have Teams meetings and Meet Now. I've kind of grouped them together because the functionalities fundamentally are the same, right? So a Teams meeting will allow you to have up to 250 people working together in a meeting in exactly what you would expect. However, if you have 250 people simultaneously logged into a meeting, I would be questioning your learning and teaching style. If you've ever tried to manage a 250-person meeting, it's really hard, particularly if those people, how should I put this, don't express the correct behaviors in a meeting. That being said, we are working on tools for Teams to make that a better experience. So one of our most highly requested features are things like raise hand in a meeting. Okay, so those sorts of functionalities are being built specifically for education in mind. Things like automatically muting. So you would have seen that now if you enter a meeting and there's people already in a meeting, it will say, hey, there are 6 people already in this meeting, we're going to mute you by default. So you don't come into the meeting and break everybody's flow, okay? So those sorts of things we're actively working to improve the experience for large meetings. But to be honest, in teaching, if you do have 250 students trying to collaborate together in a meeting, I would be questioning, is this more of a live event? Okay, is this something that's a one-to-many broadcast? Is this a lecture? Where you don't necessarily want students to be asking questions in real time. They can ask questions in chat still, so there is a rich question and answer functionality that you as the teacher or your TAs can moderate, but it's not, oh, by the way, I've got a question in the middle of a lecture of 250 people. So it's just about choosing the right platform for delivering. So yeah, live events also allows you, as again, it's going to be recorded by default, it allows me to do my webinars. No, I'll open it, it's fine. I'm trying not to break the flow. The poor guy that's going to have to edit the video is going to have to edit all this out. Nah, it's all good. Yeah, cool. So, with live events, when I deliver webinars, and I have a webinar series that I'll be delivering really, really soon, I'm really open and upfront. I don't do those live. I pre-record my webinars. There's a couple of reasons I do that. One, I am one person in a region that spans from New Zealand to India.
Oh, okay. I was asking about pengalaman tadi kat user.
Roll. Yeah. Cool. So what I'm going to, oh, sorry. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to talk about Teams as a platform. Now, Rob showed you Professor Kellerman's video earlier. What I'm going to do is give you a couple of other examples, starting at the very basic, how you can start as Teams as a platform, right through to detailing exactly how we did Professor Kellerman's piece, and that'll segue nicely into the Teams plus Moodle better together, how they actually integrate, and most of that work was done as a part of the UNSW build for Professor Kellerman as well. So, I'm not going to talk about this slide. I'm going to jump straight through it. What it shows you, though, is all the different ways that you can build on top of Teams. Teams, as I said at the start, is not just about chat. It's not just about meetings. It's not just about telephony. It's about the wider ecosystem. And for you as educators, for you as IT pros, for you as leaders in your respective fields, bringing in the tools that you need to get your job done. Be they first-party Microsoft tools, second-party, third-party, or bespoke. Why are you taking photographs? So, really quick summary. Now, we have tools that service the needs of all the different verticals. So, be they healthcare, manufacturing, retail. Funnily enough, the slide that our marketing people prepared puts education right at the front. Okay, so education, obviously for me, is important one, but that's because in education we use to teach our students of the future all of the other tools, right? So to teach the future healthcare providers, we need to use the tools that healthcare providers use, so we should be bringing those into Teams as well. If we're teaching creative professionals, so people that will be working in photography or potentially in advertising and marketing, we need to have access to things like Adobe Creative Cloud and the files that we use in Adobe CC. So we can bring those into Teams as well so that students can surface, again, the tools and the files and the resources they need to get their jobs done as students. But we can take that a step further. Education specifically. Now, I gave you an invitation before to loop me in with any education content providers that you think are really important in your place. So in Malaysia, if there is someone or an organization or a content provider that you want to see inside of Teams, I would love to add them to this list. Okay, right now we have over 200. Flipgrid, you see, is right there in the top left. That's a first-party application, right down to Moodle and Turnitin. So we now have a native Turnitin integration with Teams as well, because obviously plagiarism is top of mind for universities, and taking and actually working with Turnitin and others to look at things, not just plagiarism per se, but how students are using paid people or actually paying others to submit assignments and coming up with algorithms to detect all of that stuff as well.
The thing, because in Moodle, you have the account, you can integrate into the Moodle, right?
Same thing with this, yeah.
So you need to use the university account?
Correct, yeah. So it'll be the same connector. So if you already have Turnitin, which most of you probably do, then it's a conversation with Turnitin to say, hey, we're also going to use Turnitin through Teams. Again, that's a decision the university makes, that's fine. Some choose not to use Teams for assignment submissions with Turnitin, others do, and we're just giving you the options and the flexibility to use Teams as that platform. So if you did, then yes, you'd contact Turnitin and say, can you provide me with another key and secret, and then you plug that into Teams and you can basically do the same sorts of things that you do inside of Moodle for assignment submissions.
In the Moodle, so how there is API to integrate with the team, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually going to demo. The last part of is a walkthrough of that integration. Yeah. No dramas. I'm going to start with the most simple example of Teams as a platform, and I'm going to highlight Michigan State University in the United States. They have invested very heavily in SharePoint. So they use SharePoint as an intranet and also as websites. And they wanted to make sure that they're getting their end users, be they students or faculty or professional workers, using that internal intranet more than what they had been. The way that they did that, and again, this is not a real page. I'm not allowed to use the real one that they've created, so we've created a mock-up. We created an app, and you can see here, this is the global navigation on the left. At the very top is the logo for Michigan State University. If I click on that, it opens up the relevant SharePoint page. Really simple integration. So if you have a web page, it could be a library page, it could be some kind of informational material that's relevant to students and that students need to have access on a frequent basis, you could have that available as the very top icon or anywhere within that as a way of getting students to interact with that content more. Okay, that's one way. Each one of these, you can have as many as you want. You also have the ... which means additional. You get to customize that as a university, and you can customize it down to individuals or as types of users. So students can see a different range of buttons to what teachers see, and your IT pros can see other things. So if they have monitoring tools for their infrastructure, they can have a button there that just brings up a dashboard, for example. All of that is possible and controllable by the IT team. I'm going to talk about Griffith University. This is a new one. Okay? It's not even formalized yet. I'm actually sort of broadcasting this and recording it when I'm probably not supposed to, but that's okay, because I love this case study and I love Gary Grant, Professor Gary Grant, who really has taken Teams as a platform to the next level. So you saw Professor Kellerman and what he's doing. What this guy here, Professor Gary Grant, is doing is creating an entire simulated workforce. Okay, so the idea being we have a capstone course in a pharmacology program. So it's basically a medical degree where people are graduating to be pharmacologists working inside of hospitals and pharmacies and things like that. And traditionally in these degree programs, the final 6 months is a placement. So they would go to a hospital or they would go to a pharmacy, or they'd basically be put somewhere to study and learn just by doing. What the professor found, though, was, well, there's a bit of a problem with that because you never know what you're going to get with a placement. So one hospital could be quite different to another hospital, which could be very, very different to being in a remote school or a remote country town in Australia where you don't get to see different types of cases. And what they wanted to do, and the professor in particular wanted to do, was make sure that every student got access to every kind of experience that they could expect in the real world. And the only way that they could do that was by simulating in a really authentic way. So he started by creating physical mock pharmacies. So what you see is an actual physical space, and the students are expected to work in groups to run what is essentially a real business. They're given cash flow, they're given budgets, they're given refrigeration temperatures, they're provided with everything that you could possibly imagine would need to be taken care of as a pharmacist. Okay? Those are managed right down to logistics, to stock availability, to prescriptions, to patient notes, case notes. All of that is managed through Teams and OneNote. Okay, so they use OneNote as the, for example, patient data storage, where it's all fake patients, but it's very, very detailed. Oftentimes there's deliberately mistakes in there, so they have to go through an audit. And then we use Teams as the collaboration place where students get personalized mentorship from experts in the field. So, example, we get actors, real actors, to walk into their pretend pharmacies presenting a certain problem. It could be a mother with a child that's sick, and then they have to make very high pressure decisions that could mean a life and death decision for the child. And in the spot, what they do is, because anyone that's ever worked with medical education or is a medico themselves knows that the opinion of one medical professional is not really how medicine works. It's about the community of medical professionals and how they collaborate and share ideas and swarm on a case that really improves patient outcomes. And what they do here is, if they don't know the answer or don't know what to do, they can reach out to professionals who may well be working in a hospital 1,000 kilometers away. But they are real doctors, and they are really experts in whatever field that they need to be an expert in, and then those experts mentor the students and provide them feedback and ideas and help swarm on the patient, which is really high pressure. On top of that, there are even scenarios where the students are forced to face with the death of a patient. So they have counsellors and grief counsellors working through teams to support those students through those really difficult events, which really prepares you for the real world, right? So that's giving them skills that they would not otherwise be able to really experience. The whole thing, again, is managed through Teams as the communication platform in combination with a real physical space, and on top of that, having actors sort of really make it authentic. He does other things that make this really, really special. Each one of these students is wearing a kind of like a Fitbit, like a heart monitoring and kind of a specialized wrist device. It's like like an Apple Watch kind of thing. It monitors their heart rate, their resting heart rate. It monitors their perspiration. Basically, it's monitoring their stress levels. And every time we see an interaction, which is time-stepped inside of Teams, every time we see something happen, we're able to match that with basically the bio-indexing of the student and say, okay, this student is stressed, and the lecturer can actually go and intervene to make sure that they're okay and provide that physical face-to-face counselling as needed as well. On top of that, we're looking at using that data, and he obviously visualises the whole thing in Power BI through Teams. We're able to now say, well, there's probably a really good use case for some things like mindfulness training. So in the next iteration, the professor is looking at adding that layer of mindfulness training to these medical professionals so that when stressful environments happen, he's able to sort of improve the performance of the doctors. And of course, for him, personally able to write up the importance of mindfulness training in medical professionals. So he's doing academic research, the students are learning, they're getting unparalleled mentorship by their future peers, and they're really learning how to swarm inside of a medical environment on patient and improve patient outcomes. And more interestingly, these students are now going into hospitals and telling the hospitals that they need to be using Teams to swarm on patients as well. So it's sort of a snowballing effect. So the students are now teaching their peers and their future teachers how to do their jobs, which is kind of interesting. UNSW, now I'm not going to spend as long as I typically would going through the example because we showed the video earlier today. What I will do is deep dive into some of the areas that weren't captured in the video. So obviously it's more than a 10-minute video. There's a lot that went into the development of this bot. It's a lot of work on part of the partners and the engineering teams. We created APIs for them to work with. So there was a lot of back and forth. But now we have something that I'm really proud to announce we're going to be open sourcing end to end. So hopefully by the end of this year, everything that you saw in that video, right down from the asking a question through to the release of those automatic resource curation through Teams, will be available in GitHub and fully documented. So you can put it on Azure and put it into Teams and use it as you need. You can also modify that code as needed as well. So, in summary, for those that weren't in that early session, Professor Kellerman had a problem. Okay, he's a lecturer of a very large course. And for anyone that's taught a very large course, it's very, very hard to help every student. And you feel really, really bad when you miss a student. And it happens to all of us. Anyone that's ever taught knows that you could have actually done something better in the classroom that would have changed the outcome for a student. Professor Kellerman is one of those ultra teachers that is truly passionate about teaching above anything else. And he wanted to make sure that that didn't happen to him ever again, and he wanted to make sure that he was able to answer all of the questions a student could possibly have, and all of his students would therefore be provided with an equal learning opportunity and therefore be successful not just in their first year of university, but be set up for success in their second, third, fourth years of university as well. To do that, it started with a very simple question and answer bot, an untrained bot. Okay? This was not trained. He didn't spend hours and hours pre-populating the data set so the bot knew how to answer things. Instead, the student would @mention the question bot. The bot would then identify who that student's teacher is, because you have the lecturer overlooking the whole cohort, and then you have TAs that look after each of the tutorial groups. And because we know through the underlying data set which student belongs to which class, and therefore which teacher teaches which class, we can then mention that teacher to go and answer the question. Okay? It's pretty logical. It's pretty simple when you think about it. And because the teacher goes in and answers that student's question, the bot learns that answer. So the next time a student asks a similar question, it is able to present back responses to the students. Okay? Also, which wasn't another thing that wasn't mentioned in the video, this is using natural language processing. So we all know that students ask things in different ways. You know, you can phrase the same question a billion different ways, and the bot will still present back the same response. Okay? It's smart enough to understand the language, and the more that you use it, the more that people are asking questions, the better it gets. Always refer to this because the professor said if it doesn't work on a mobile, it doesn't work for students. And I've sat in Professor Kellerman's lectures, and it's really funny to watch.